There are states today where a single roadside inspection can hand a trucker a ticket bigger than the tractor he's sitting in. One stop at the scale house, one officer with a flashlight, and $25,000 is gone before lunch. And the tricks that trigger those fines are, almost every one of them, things drivers did openly in the 1970s without a second thought. Today we're counting down 15 banned trucker tricks that can end a career in a single stop. And number one is a CB radio legend so famous that Hollywood built an entire movie around it. But before the fines, you have to understand the world that invented these tricks. From the fuel crisis of 1973 through the 90s, trucking ran on paper logbooks, handshake deals, and a Channel 19 grapevine that stretched from Bakersfield to Bangor. Drivers were squeezed between impossible delivery windows and pay that only counted moving miles, so an entire underground playbook grew up in the truck stops and scale house parking lots. Then, one by one, the government found every page of it. Here's what each trick was, why it worked, and what it costs now. Number 15. The Scale House Shuffle. Old hands knew a platform scale could be fooled if you worked it right. A driver rolling across the coupe would creep the truck, ride the brakes to rock weight forward off the drives, or dump the air suspension at just the right moment so an axle read light. Some slid the trailer tandems in the parking lot 100 yards before the scale, moving thousands of pounds from one axle group to another to squeak past the bridge formula. Today, the game is over. Weigh-in motion sensors buried in the highway read the truck at full speed before it ever reaches the ramp, and certified axle scales catch the shuffle instantly. An officer who watches a driver riding his brakes across the platform can order a full reweigh, and anything that looks like deliberate scale manipulation gets written up on top of the overweight itself. The trick that once saved a ticket now guarantees a longer conversation inside the scale house, and those conversations rarely end cheap. Number 14. Pencil-whipped inspections. Every commercial truck needs a periodic inspection, and for decades the sticker mattered more than the wrenching. A friendly shop would sign off a truck with cracked brake drums and a leaking wheel seal, slap the sticker on the door, and send it down the road. Some outfits skipped the shop entirely and bought stickers by the roll. Roadside enforcement eventually made the paper worthless. A DOT inspector crawling under the trailer doesn't care what the sticker says, and a truck with out-of-service brake defects gets parked on the spot, sticker and all. Falsified inspection reports are treated as fraud. The fines stack per violation, and the carrier's safety score takes a hit that follows every truck in the fleet. During the big inspection blitzes each spring, thousands of trucks get parked in a single week, and a fair number of them are wearing a fresh sticker that never saw a mechanic. And paper wasn't the only corner getting cut back then. Some of the cheapest shortcuts in the business were riding right out front on the steer axle. Number 13. Regrooved steer tires. Tires were always one of the biggest bills on the truck, and the old economy move was to cut new tread into a worn casing or run recaps everywhere, including up front. The problem sits right in the physics. A steer tire failure at 70 miles an hour takes the steering with it, which is why federal rules ban regrooved tires on the steer axle of a heavy truck unless the casing was specifically built for it. A worn or improperly regrooved steer caught at inspection means a violation, possible out-of-service time, and the cost of 2 premium tires anyway, now with a fine on top. The shredded rubber alligators lying on every interstate shoulder in America are the argument nobody needed written down. And worn rubber still wasn't the scariest thing rolling under those old trucks. The scariest thing was what some drivers unhooked on purpose. Number 12. Disconnected front brakes. This one sounds insane today, but for decades it was gospel in certain truck stops. Drivers in the 50s and 60s believed front brakes caused jackknifes on ice, so they backed them off or unhooked them entirely and let the drives and trailer do the stopping. Some tractors in that era even left the factory without front brakes at all. Modern brake regulations ended the debate. Every wheel needs working brakes. Inspectors measure push rod stroke with a ruler, and a truck with enough defective brakes goes out of service automatically. A loaded rig needs every foot of stopping distance it can get, and the fine for running dead brakes is the cheapest part of what can go wrong. Number 11. Running oversize in the dark. A legal wide load is a parade. Permits, approved routes, daylight hours, flags, banners, and pilot cars front and rear. An illegal wide load in 1979 was a driver with nerve moving a 14-foot wide building at 3 in the morning on empty county roads, and plenty of houses, boats, and machinery moved across this country exactly that way. States shut it down hard. Running oversize without a valid permit brings fines that scale with the load, and if that load meets a bridge railing or an overpass, the driver owns the repair bill and the lawsuit behind it. Highway departments now photograph and measure trucks automatically, so the giant load sliding through town at midnight gets recorded even when nobody's awake to see it. Number 10. Blowing past the chain law. When the signs light up on Donner Pass or Vale Pass, commercial trucks are required to hang iron, and chaining up in a snowstorm at 7,000 feet is miserable, knuckle-splitting work, so generations of drivers gambled, rolling past the chain-up area with the flashers on and hoping the tires held to the bottom. Colorado and California stopped finding it funny. Ignoring the chain law brings a fine of several $100s, and if that unchained truck spins out and closes the pass, the fine multiplies into the thousands, while a few hundred vehicles sit parked behind the wreck. A single spun-out 18-wheeler on Interstate 70 can shut down freight across half the country for a night, which is exactly why the state cameras now watch the chain stations around the clock. The mountain gamblers got caught by cameras. This next dodge got caught by a question no driver wanted to answer at the scale house. Number 9. Farm tags on a freight truck. Farm vehicles get real exemptions. Cheaper plates, relaxed hours rules, and lighter paperwork, all meant for a grain truck running from the field to the local elevator. The old dodge was to hang farm plates on a rig that was really hauling commercial freight across 3 states, skipping apportioned registration, fuel tax filings, and sometimes the CDL rules entirely. Enforcement learned to ask simple questions. What's in the trailer? Who owns it? And where's it going? A farm-tagged truck caught hauling for higher faces fines, back taxes, and in some states, an impound. And the bill for the registration you dodge comes due all at once with penalties riding on top. Number 8. Camping on the ramps. Every driver knows the math. Federal hours rules force the truck to shut down, but there are far more trucks than legal parking spaces in this country, and by 9 at night, the truck stops from Pennsylvania to California are full. So drivers park where they can, on exit ramps and highway shoulders, and wake up to a trooper's knuckles on the door. Shoulder parking tickets run into the hundreds. Towing a loaded tractor trailer costs 4 figures, and a truck clipped on a dark ramp becomes a liability case with the parked driver's name on it. And the squeeze gets worse in winter because the same states writing parking tickets also enforce idling limits, which means engine off and cold bunk. Old hands solve that one the way they solve everything, with something cheap that lives in the side box, and the item I keep hearing about from drivers lately is called TerraShell. It's a fold-out emergency sleeping bag lined with an aluminized layer that bounces your own body heat straight back into the bag, so the bunk stays warm enough to actually sleep with the engine off at 10 below. The whole thing stuffs down to about the size of a soda can, needs no fuel and no batteries, and there's no setup beyond shaking it open and crawling in. One of these runs less than a single shoulder parking ticket, which is why so many owner-operators are riding with one behind the seat all winter now. If you want to take a look, there's a link down in the description. Number 7. The personal conveyance loophole. When electronic logs killed the paper tricks, drivers went hunting for the gray areas, and the biggest one was personal conveyance, the off-duty status meant for driving to dinner or a motel. The dodge was to run out of hours and then flip to personal conveyance while easing a loaded trailer 40 more miles toward the receiver, calling it a search for safe parking. Federal guidance closed the gap. and auditors now lay the GPS trail over the log. An off-duty truck that happens to travel straight toward its delivery for an hour tells its own story, and enforcement reads it as what it is: falsification. That means fines in the thousands, a 10-hour out-of-service order on the spot, and a mark that follows the driver from carrier to carrier. Number 6. The GPS shortcut. Toll bills on a big truck are brutal, and the modern Dodge was letting a car GPS route the rig through free local roads, or taking the cut-through on purpose. The problem is that those roads are banned to trucks for a reason, and the reason is usually 11 feet tall and made of 100-year-old stone. New York's parkways and Boston's low bridges have peeled open so many trailers that locals treat it as a spectator sport. Cities now enforce truck routes with cameras and dedicated patrols. New York fines climb into the thousands for repeat violators, and a bridge strike adds infrastructure damage, closed lanes, and a carrier's insurance nightmare to the ticket. The toll money saved on the George Washington Bridge has never once covered the cost of a trailer roof lying in the road behind you. Number 5. Doctor shopping the physical. Every driver needs a medical card, and for decades the exam was only as strict as the doctor you picked. Drivers with blood pressure problems, sleep apnea, or insulin issues learned which strip mall clinic never pumped the cuff all the way up, and a few skipped the waiting room entirely and filled out the card themselves at the truck stop fuel desk. In 2014, the government created a national registry of certified medical examiners and tied the results directly to the CDL. Now the state licensing office sees the exam result electronically. A fake or expired card downgrades the license automatically, and driving on falsified medical paperwork is treated as fraud with fines and disqualification attached. The easy doctor is gone, and the counter card era went with him. Number 4. The CDL mill. If the medical card could be bought, so could the license itself. Through the 90s, certain testing operations quietly sold passing scores, and the most infamous case blew up in Illinois, where investigators followed the bribes from the driver testing lots all the way up into the Secretary of State's office, and the prosecutions kept a federal courthouse in Chicago busy for years. Thousands of drivers had to be retested, and some of the bought licenses were connected to fatal crashes that made national news. Today, third-party examiners are audited, fraudulent licenses are federally prosecuted, and a driver caught with a bought CDL loses it permanently, while the school that sold it faces criminal charges. Of everything on this list, this is the trick that put people in prison. Number 3. The placard game. A truck hauling hazardous materials wears diamond-shaped placards, and those placards invite everything a driver hates. Restricted routes, tunnel bans, mandatory scale stops, and extra inspection attention. The outlaw move was to pull the placards, or never hang them, and run the load as ordinary freight straight through the tunnel. This is where the fine schedule stops being a traffic matter. Federal hazmat penalties run tens of thousands of dollars per violation per day, and serious cases climb towards 6 figures because an unmarked tanker in a tunnel fire means responders walking into something they can't identify. Roadside officers check shipping papers against the trailer, and a mismatch turns an inspection into a federal case. This is the single fastest route to the $25,000 ticket in the title, and drivers have found even bigger numbers than that. Number 2. The phantom co-driver. Team operations can legally keep a truck rolling almost around the clock, one driver in the bunk while the other holds the wheel. The old outlaw math was simpler. Invent the second driver. A wife's name penciled into the logbook, a cousin who never left Ohio, a co-driver who existed only on paper while one exhausted man ran coast to coast in 50 hours. Freight brokers got impossible transit times and learned not to ask. Electronic logging killed the ghost, because every driver now logs in under a registered account tied to a real license, and the engine data shows exactly who could not have been driving. Logging miles under a fake co-driver is falsification, penalized in the thousands per offense, and a pattern of it can end a carrier's operating authority entirely. The Phantom rode shotgun for 40 years, and he finally got put out at the last exit. And that brings us to number 1, the rocking chair. When the national 55-mile-an-hour limit landed in 1974, drivers paid by the mile lost real money to it overnight, and the CB radio became a weapon. Trucks ran in coordinated packs, a front door up ahead calling out every Smoky, a back door watching the rear, and the trucks in the middle riding the rocking chair, protected on both ends and running 15 over across entire states. Some convoys used a four-wheeler Rabbit running hot out front to trip the radar first. The 1978 movie Convoy barely had to exaggerate any of it. Today, the rocking chair is finished. Laser guns pick a single truck out of the pack, aircraft enforcement clocks the whole line at once, and a coordinated speed run can be written as reckless driving for every rig involved, with CSA points that follow each driver and fleet telematics reporting the speed before the trooper does. The Convoy survives now as a movie, a song, and a story told over coffee, which is probably the only place it was ever going to grow old. Run back through those 15 and the same story repeats itself. Every trick was invented by working men caught between freight that had to move and rules that didn't leave room to move it. And every trick died the same way, to a sensor, a database, or a camera that never sleeps. The highways are safer for most of it, and the drivers who ran those years knew the risk they were carrying better than anyone. But they hauled this country's steel, grain, and groceries with a paper logbook and a radio, and that deserves remembering. If you drove in that era, tell us in the comments which of these you saw with your own eyes and which ones we still missed, because the old hands keep proving this well runs deep. And if these stories take you back, hit subscribe, because next time we're covering the legendary trucks of the 1970s that regulations wiped off the road, the cab-overs, the big Detroits, and the rigs you'll never see leave a factory again. Keep the shiny side up.